Hello and welcome to Josh's celebration of life. I'm really glad you could make it. I need to clarify a few things before we start here. I have no idea how to do live stuff or anything on YouTube, so I pre-recorded all of this and uploaded it because I didn't know how to do it live. Also, I knew there was no way in the world I could get through this live. So I just felt it was best to record it, which was good because most things took multiple takes because of crying, obviously. We got together and we made this earlier and then went ahead and are posting it live now. It hasn't been easy waiting a full month to do Josh's celebration of life, but we felt it was best to do it on either a solstice or an equinox because of Josh's beliefs, and we thought that would be the best time to do it. And so equinox wasn't that far away, so we decided to go ahead and wait. The equinox isn't until Monday at 12:19 p.m., I believe, for the full equinox, but we're within the 24-hour period, so I thought that would still work, and we wanted to do it. We didn't think it'd be good to do it on a Monday during a work day in the middle of the day, so for people to be able to watch. So that's why we waited, and I'm glad we did because it's a day of passage, and it fits well with his beliefs and some of my beliefs as well too. So I think it'd be a great day for him to pass on to the next world. Thanks for joining us. I need to clarify a couple more things. First, I didn't want to discuss this, but I feel it's necessary. My mom made the comment to me. She said, "This is a really odd way to find out about my grandson the week after he died with the flood of love and support that was coming across all of the social media platforms." And I felt I needed to let my family and friends know, that I tried very, very hard to separate Josh's family world from his online world. And Josh worked with me on that as well because of the just insane amount of hate and ugliness that is in the online world. About quite a few years ago, they set up a subreddit page which was dedicated to trolling Josh. And it was gross. And the things that went up on that page were disgusting. They were horrible. They were mean. And by the end of it, before they finally took the page down, there were 44,000 subscribers to that page. And I saw this stuff, and it was so gross, and it was so heartbreaking, and it was so hard to look at. And around 8 years ago, somebody in that online world decided that I was an absolute piece of shit, horrible father. And so they started making these posts, made up posts about me and what a piece of shit father I was. And for some reason, as in the online world things do, that took off. And because that took off, the internet also became filled with just really, really horrible, disgusting things about me. And I've had to sit down with all of my bosses and have talks with them and let them know, hey, this is out there, just so you know. I have no control over it, so there's nothing I can do about it. But it's there. I have to let my clients know. I have to let my theater friends know that this stuff is out there. You can't tag my name on anything, or it just gets attacked with vile, vile, vile comments. Again, I'm not sure where that narrative came from. Everybody, all of my family and friends who are close to our family know how involved I have always been in Josh's life and how I am a good father, and I've always been a good father to Josh. Not a perfect father by any means, but a good father. And along with some of that ickiness, I mean, it was so gross, they literally they used Photoshop and AI to create pornographic images of Josh and I having sex together. It was horrible. So when my friends would learn about Josh and they'd say, oh, what's his channel? I'll look him up. I would say, do not look him up. Please, for the love of God, do not go searching the internet for Josh, because I didn't want them seeing this stuff. I'm not ashamed of Josh. I'm not ashamed of his YouTube channel. There were certainly some videos he's made over time that shouldn't have been made, and we had long talks about that. But It wasn't that. And I didn't want my family and my friends seeing all of that gross stuff to start it. And I also didn't want my family and friends involved in that online world because I didn't want them to become targets the way I had become a target. And so it was to protect them. And Josh was very helpful in that, to make sure that we kept our family as separate as we could so that they didn't become targets. Because it's gross. Anybody who was nice to Josh became a target. I know several people in the online world who've had to change their phone numbers and change their emails because they were harassed so much just for being nice to Josh. Businesses have had to block because they were good to Josh. Just random people that Josh mentioned from his past would have to change their phone numbers and emails because they got so much attacks from these people. I personally received tons and tons of messages every single day, all day long, on my phone, through Messenger, texting, voicemails, emails through 2 accounts, just nonstop hate and attack. And so I felt it very important to try to protect my family from them. Josh's true fans, I didn't know you were out there. I didn't know that there were so many of you. All I ever sadly got to see in that world was the ugliness. So I fought it a lot. And after Josh died, the flood of love and support that came in was crazy. And it was also very helpful. To see that and to know that his entire online world wasn't just gross, it wasn't just ugliness, it wasn't just meanness, that there were actually good people there. So thank you to all of you that did the tributes, all of you that sent me personal messages. Believe it or not, I actually did read them. I normally don't. Anything I get from that world is just deleted and blocked immediately. It has been for years because it's always so ugly. But this time I did read them, so thank you. For the time you took to send me those messages and send comfort and let me know that Josh was loved. And that meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to my family. I'm sorry I won't accept your friend request on Facebook. I know better. There's a line there. I don't know how many of you are real when you start sending me friend requests. So I definitely won't go there, but I do want you to know that I did read your messages and I did appreciate them. So anyways, to all of you in that world, you're now going to get to see Josh's family life for the first time. And you're going to get to see how we viewed Josh, and you get to see how we interacted with Josh, and you get to see for the first time how much he was in our lives. Josh and I didn't share any of this on his page. I made sure I nagged him frequently that this stuff doesn't go on his page, because I didn't want my family to become more targets than they already were. I personally have had many death threats. I've had roadkill placed on my front porch in the morning. Somebody loosened all the lug nuts on my vehicle one day and my tires were just going like this. It's not pretty. So please, to my family and friends, please forgive me for not wanting you to be involved in that, but I certainly think you can all understand why. To the fans of Josh, I think you're going to really enjoy getting to see this side of Josh's life that you've never seen before. To the Josh's tormentors, I sincerely hope that you will see this and maybe for the first time in your life realize that Josh was a human being. Josh had a family. He was a son and a grandson and a great-grandson, and he was a nephew, and he was a cousin, and he was loved, and he was a human being. And all of these LOL cows that you like to call them, that you go after on YouTube nonstop all day, these are people, and they're people with families. And if Josh's life could mean anything, and the only reason I did decide to break down this wall and share this with the online world, and I'm still not sure I'm doing the right thing here, because I know what you guys are going to do with this material, and I know how gross you're going to make it. But realize that this is a person, And I hope for the first time maybe you get to see Josh as a human being and not a plaything, not your toy. And I hope maybe that you can take that and apply it to some of the other people that you attack every day, and hopefully maybe see them in a little different light as well. So again, I didn't want to go into this, but I felt it was very necessary. So now we're going to move on to Josh's celebration. Normally we would do a slideshow full of images and music. We can't do music, of course, because it's YouTube, so it'd all be copyrighted and would be taken down. So I decided to narrate Josh's video and just tell stories and talk about who Josh was and the different phases of his life and who he was as a person and who he was to us. And our family will share a couple of their stories as well. So that's what's going to happen. And next, and then we're going to start out with Josh's youngest sister is going to read a beautiful poem written by a fan, Emma Jane Flora. This poem... This poem really touched me. So thank you for this poem. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed Josh's celebration of life.
For King Cobra JFS, a tribute. By Emma Jane Flora, a fellow outsider who saw the spark. I found you in the silence of lockdown nights, a voice rough with gravel, singing Aussie in flickering light. Not polished, not clean, but realer than most, a gothic soul, a wand maker, Casper's ghost. You rode your bike through town like a spell on wheels, no script, no mask, just truth that heals. And something stirred in me, quiet but loud, a sense that being different could still make you proud. We were born in the same year, but you lived without fear, while I wore a mask to be liked. You wore leather and eyeliner like armor in the fight. They laughed at you, but I never did, because behind your pain I saw the kid, who was bullied too young and treated without care, just like me, gasping for breath in stale, heavy air. You were raw, you were broken, you were brave, and though the world didn't know how to behave, you stayed you. With your tactical soap and steel resolve, a reminder that I didn't need to dissolve. So thank you, Josh, for being the goth wizard of truth, for holding the line since our youth. You'll never know how much it meant, but your impact was real. Your time was well spent. I just wish I could say this while you were still near, that you helped me come back to myself crystal clear. So wherever you ride now, through mist, through stars, know that you left behind more than battle scars. Rest easy, King. Your magic lives on in the songs we sing. Stay strong, stay weird, and never stop being unapologetically you, even in death. We'll meet at Cobra's Cantina, and we'll have a drink with Ozzy. That's what's up.
I used this photo in Josh's obituary, and I just wanted to thank the person who took it. I don't know where it came from. It was something Josh sent me via text many years ago, but I just love this photograph of Josh, and so I put it in software and did the dispersion brush and made it like it is, but I just love this photo and wanted to thank whoever took it. I really wanted to open this video with Ozzy Osbourne's Crazy Train, the opening of that song, because that was the ringtone I used for Josh, and every time it would blare out of my phone, I'd yell, "It's my boy!" And then I'd, of course, proceed to let it ring for a while just so I could listen to that epic guitar riff in the beginning. But sadly, that's copyrighted, so we can't use any music in the video. Ozzy was the first concert I took Josh to, and Josh just fell in love with Ozzy and fell in love with his music and became an instant fan. And then, of course, over the years, just continued to follow Ozzy and love Ozzy and be obsessed with Ozzy, as everybody knows. When Josh was born, it was without a doubt the happiest day of my life. I remember being in the delivery room and seeing him be born and then holding him for the first time and realizing for the first time in my life what true unconditional love really was. And I couldn't wait to be a dad, and I was so excited. And then Josh had complications, so he ended up in the hospital for a little over a week, and I know it was just a super scary time for us, and that as a parent you really realize again what true love really, really is. For a few years during Josh's toddler life, it was just Josh and I, and we did everything together. We were inseparable, and we were the dynamic duo, and we used to spend all day watching Disney movies, and then we go to the gymnastics club. I ran gymnastics clubs at the time, and we just hang out all day with the kids in the gymnastics clubs, and we go home and hang out at night. And it was just the two of us until we met Tanis. And Tanis changed our lives forever. Became Josh's mom, also brought Josh's grandparents and great-grandparents and some more aunts and some more uncles and a lot more cousins, and just made our family a lot bigger and a lot more complete. From the time Josh was little, he was always very unique and different, and we knew at a very young age that he was special needs and was going to need some extra help. And later in life found out that he was diagnosed with Asperger syndrome, a form of autism. And part of that syndrome, kids with that tend to obsess over things. And if you've ever watched Josh's videos or met Josh or know Josh at all, you know that he had his obsessions, and they were limited. And the common thing with kids with Asperger's is they only know a certain thing, so that's all they talk about. And with Josh, it was Big Ben, clock towers, and bell towers, and it was smoking. He was obsessed with smoking pipes, obsessed with smoking cigarettes. He was also obsessed with shotguns, obsessed with Model Ts. He was obsessed with king cobras and snakes, and obsessed with magic and the idea of conjuring thunderstorms, and also obsessed with the movie Tombstone. And Josh and I used to run the whole Doc Holliday sketches all the time. Doc Holliday and Ringo, we'd do that sketch a lot, and Josh loved to quote that movie as well. So as I look back on Josh's life, when he was older, and I started wondering where these obsessions came from, and it all became very clear. As I said, Josh and I used to watch Disney movies all day long, and Big Ben and smoking pipes and smoking cigarettes was all the cartoon of 101 Dalmatians, which was one of his favorites. We used to watch it over and over again. Then we also watched The Fox and the Hound a lot, and The Fox and the Hound were shotguns and also the Model T cars. And then, of course, Tombstone. But then the Cobras came from Aladdin, and his obsession with King Cobra's Jafar, and Jafar had a cobra staff, and he used that staff to create magic and conjure thunderstorms and become this King Cobra snake who was all powerful. And that's where that came from. So all of Josh's obsessions later in life actually started when he was 3-4 years old and watching Disney movies. And I think that really sums up Josh as a person, because of his obsessions and his inability to really do other things or let go of other things. It was always those handful of things that he was obsessed about were really all he was capable of talking about, at least for a prolonged period of time. So I had no idea at the time that those Disney movies would play such an integral part of Josh's entire life. So as Josh continues to grow, I remember the first time he discovered his own religion. So the word Cobraverse is often used in Josh's online world. That's what they call the people who are involved in this world. But it's actually a term that Josh used when he was young, way before any of the YouTube even started. He wrote a story and he shared it with me, and it was this amazing story, and it was about the Cobraverse. And in the Cobraverse, Cobraton was a god, and Cobraton was, of course, a cobra, a king cobra god, and he and his wife created the world and the universe, and they had a son, and they named the son King Cobra. And King Cobra was powerful magic, and he could control the weather, and and that's who he was. And it was this great story. And I said, Josh, this is incredible. And he was pretty young when he wrote it. I think 6th grade maybe. And so I was like, Josh, this is amazing. This is a great story. Are you going to keep writing? And he says, it's not a story, it's true. I said, well, hold on there, buddy. This is not true. This is something you're writing. And he said, no, but it's true. This is a true story. And this is my religion. And I said, well, Josh, buddy, you can't just invent your own religion. And he said, why not? Jesus did. And that's the way Josh's mind worked. And I'm like, okay, so what about some theological ideas here. What happens when we die? And I started talking about different theology questions with him, and he said, I haven't figured that out yet. I said, okay, so you recognize that you're figuring it out as you go, right? Yep. And then you're writing down your ideas, correct? Yep. So then, therefore, it is not real. It's made up because it's coming out of your mind. Nope, it's real. And he was 100% convinced that it was real. And the Cobra, and he was King Cobra, and he had these powers. And I said, Josh, he fully believed he can control the weather. And I said, Josh, you can't control the weather, buddy. And I'll never forget the first time we were in North Dakota, and he goes out in the yard, and he's standing there with his hands up in the air to the sky, and he's conjuring his first thunderstorm. And he came back in, and it's just a beautiful day. And I said, well, and he goes, I just conjured a thunderstorm. I said, all right. And it was like 2 or 3 weeks later, we had a thunderstorm, and Josh came in. He said, see, I told you. And that's kind of how Josh's magic worked and his thunderstorm conjuring worked. And he still does it to this day, or he did before he died. He would conjure thunderstorms, and whenever it would happen, he would take the credit for that. And then stoplights, he could control stoplights as well. And we'd pull up at a stoplight, and he'd pull out his wand, and he'd look all serious at it, and he'd point his wand at it. And if it didn't change, he'd start shaking his wand. And if it didn't change, he'd shake it a little harder. And when it finally changed, he would nod with pure satisfaction and put his wand back in his pocket. And I'd sometimes tease him about it and say, Josh, you realize that you could just watch the other light, right, and see when it's going to change, and then your timing would be perfect. Shut up, dude. I changed that light. I can control that light. I did that. And I said, all right, buddy. So Josh, along with that, Josh kind of lived in his own world. He daydreamed all the time. And he had audio hallucinations quite a bit. He would hear people say things that they didn't say, which started a lot of conversations with him and I, because we'd be together and we'd walk into a store and he'd get very upset. And I'd say, hey, what's going on? And it would be, well, that lady just said something horrible to me. And he'd make up something that she said to him. I said, Josh, that didn't happen, buddy. I'm standing right here with you. And she didn't say that. Yes, she did. So in his mind, those hallucinations were very real. And he'd hear it all the time. And there's usually people being mean to him. Once in a while, there was good things. I remember one day he said his bike, Josh's bike. Oh my gosh, he loved that bike. And that was the coolest bike in the world. And he would sit on that bike on a street corner downtown and daydream and smoke a pipe. And one time he says, yeah, these 2 hot goth girls drove by. And I heard the one girl say to the other girl, wow, check out that sexy hot goth guy riding that really kick-ass bike. That guy is so cool. And again, these were very real things to Josh, and they were very real in his head. And it was this daydreaming was actually the reason he couldn't get a driver's license, because he would just drift off and he would go into kind of another world. It was very scary with him just out on his bike, to be honest with you. And because he would often just start daydreaming. And he had driver's ed, and the driver's ed teacher said he drove fine, but whenever they'd stop at a stoplight or a stop sign, he would just kind of disappear into another world, and sometimes it would take a while for him to come back out to reality. So that was one of the reasons that he didn't drive. Along with the auditory hallucinations and the daydreaming, Josh would also have just spectacular conversations with himself. And he'd quite often get pretty animated. And there'd be several times we'd be riding around in the car, and it'd be quiet, and he'd start having a conversation with himself, and he'd be getting louder and louder and more animated. And I'd finally stop, and I'd say, hey, Josh. And he had completely forgotten I was there, completely forgotten where he was, and he'd just get stiff as a board. And then he'd kind of look at me out of the corner of his eye like, what was I doing? And I'll go, who are you talking to? And he'd say, myself. And I'd say, you having a good conversation? Yeah. So that was always made for some interesting dialogue with Josh. With Asperger's, Josh also needed the same routine. He needed the same routine every single day, all the time, which is one of the reasons traveling was so hard on Josh, because he had to have his routine interrupted, and he never did very well with that. If you look at Josh's glasses and these old pictures of him when he was little, Josh, as an adult, picked out almost the exact same pair of glasses, and I didn't understand it when we were getting the glasses, but he just had to have that exact pair. They didn't fit him real well, but he didn't care. It's got to be this pair. It's got to be this pair. And I didn't understand why he was just so insistent on this pair of glasses until I got home and I saw the picture of us together hangs above my dresser. And when I saw that, I went, wait a second, that's the exact same pair of glasses he had when he was 2. And that alone really just sums up who Josh was with his obsessions, which I always found very interesting. From the time he was 2, he's at the age of 34, he still hadn't let that go. A big part of Josh's life was sadly his harassment. I don't know why, but for some reason, people just flocked to him to harass him. Even as an adult, and he made himself kind of scary looking, and I think he did that as a defense mechanism, hoping that people would leave him alone. But he was also a big guy. Whenever we got in public, not even exaggerating, we were at a grocery store and little kids would harass him. They'd just walk up to him and start teasing him. It was so strange. And everywhere we went, this happened. And it was that way his whole life, from the time he was a small child. When he was in 5th grade, the harassment became so bad that his teacher asked me to come in and talk to the class to explain to them that Josh was a little different and who he was and try to get them to be nice to him. The bus driver, our driveway was the bus stop for a while there, and the bus driver stopped and got out of the bus and he said, these kids will not leave him alone. And it started with 1 kid, and then pretty soon it was 3 kids, and now literally there's like 10, 15 kids on that bus who just harass him the entire bus trip. And he said, I can't control it because I'm trying to ride the bus, but I wanted to make you aware. And I actually had to go to the principal and tell the principal either he was going to ride that bus or I was, because this was going to stop. And the principal finally rode the bus and got things under control. But the reason I shared that story is because that was Josh's life. It was just so horrible, and it was all the time. It just never ended. As an adult, we were one of the last times we flew with Josh. We were at the airport, which is always very stressful for Josh anyway. And he comes out of the bathroom, and there's a guy talking to him. And I thought it must have been a fan or somebody that recognized him, so I gave him space. And then as I walked up toward the end, I realized the guy was being a jerk. And when I walked up, he walked off. And I asked Josh what that was about. And apparently the guy just randomly started attacking Josh about what he was wearing. Just harassing him and being extremely rude about the clothes he had on. And it's just, as a parent, to watch your child go through that all day, every day of his life and you can't stop it and you can't control it, is absolutely heartbreaking. You never feel so alone and so helpless in that situation. The number of times I had to go to a park and get on a group of kids and get Josh's bike back because they stole his bike from him. Things like that. It was just so frustrating.
Josh bounded into my life when he was 4 years old. I met him and Clint, and we bonded. Josh especially bonded to my dog, Ellen, a big black Labrador. And he told Clint that Clint could keep me as long as he could keep Ellen. And it was the beginning for us. And what I want to talk about with Josh, that there are 2 things that I don't know if everybody knows about him, that I want to emphasize, and that is how amazing Josh was with animals and how much he loved them and how they loved him. I've never met an animal that didn't calm when Josh was near and didn't respond to him or want to meet him. And I never met an animal that he didn't want to care for. Also, Josh's kindness, because that gets lost sometimes. And Josh was a fundamentally kind person at heart. And you can especially see that in his relationships with his extended family. For animals, it started with big dog, big black Labrador, Ellen. And then we had another Labrador named Chocolate that we got not too long after we got together, and Josh loved them. He enjoyed riding horses and getting to see cats at my parents' house, because we didn't have horses or cats for us, but they had them. And he was natural. Again, he would take care of spiders. For a while, when we were in North Dakota, he had an entire family of spiders that he took care of, and we were not allowed to do anything that would harm the spiders. He one time was bitten by a squirrel that had been hit by a car, and Josh tried to rescue it. It had been run over, and he tried to pick it up, and the poor thing bit Josh, and Josh did not want us to get mad at that squirrel because it wasn't the squirrel's fault. Two of other animals that Josh got when we were in North Dakota, a dog named Obie, and then another dog named Chance. And Chance and Josh had a special bond. Chance we adopted from the Humane Society, and Chance was kind of a misfit. We loved him, but he was definitely very unique, and Josh had this bond with Chance. In fact, when Chance got injured, Josh sat with me. This was several years later. He sat with me and Chance in the vet's office, and he held Chance's paw as Chance passed, because he wasn't going to let Chance be alone. And then later, he put a Cobra Craft sticker on Chance's ashes that we still have. A story with Obie that sticks out to me. Josh came running inside one day and told me that Obie had begun to mature. He was really coming of age, and I wasn't quite sure what to think about this, so I went out to check on Obie. Well, it turns out Obie was stung by a bee, and his face and head were about twice their normal size. Josh was concerned about that. Another animal story I wanted to share. We had a neighbor in California who had a pretty aggressive dog, more aggressive than I'd ever encountered before, except with Josh. And you could walk by the house and the dog would go crazy until they saw Josh. And then it would just calm. If there is such thing as an animal whisperer for all animals, that was Josh. Josh, of course, loved snakes. Some of the best pictures I ever got of Josh were when he got to have a boa constrictor. He got to hold them. It meant a lot to him. And he enjoyed that. He loved reptiles. He liked going to visit a reptile gardens. He loved Puff, his bearded dragon, and was so proud of Puff. And when Puff escaped, it was devastating for Josh. And Puff escaped for a very Josh reason. Josh wanted him to have fresh air. And yeah, no, Puff took advantage of that. When it comes to Josh's kindness, you see this in stories of him with animals, also with his grandparents and great-grandparents. Josh was lucky in that all of his grandparents and all but one of his great-grandparents were around for most of his life. And he loved to talk to them. You know, sometimes kids have to, parents push the kids to talk to grandparents, but Josh legitimately enjoyed talking to his grandparents and his great-grandparents and playing games and visiting them. We had wonderful summers sometimes with family members and going swimming and having a barbecue, and you really saw his kindness. He could volunteer sometimes at a senior center, and people responded to him because of that. The last material gift Josh gave me also shows his kindness. and his thoughtfulness. He went to great lengths to get me a signed picture of Princess Leia, signed by Carrie Fisher herself, and had it framed. And it's up in our house, and it always will be. It was so kind of him to do that. I love you, Josh.
I'll never forget when Josh decided to go goth. He said, "I'm goth." And I said, "Josh, you're not goth, man." He goes, "I'm goth. Shut up. You can't tell me what I am." And I said, "Josh, buddy, you're like happy all the time, and you're always smiling, and you love to make people laugh." One of Josh's biggest traits was comedy. Josh just loved to make people laugh, and he would do it all the time. From the time he was very, very little, bubblegum wrapper jokes. We'd get him books sometimes for birthdays and that, so that he could, for his silly dad type jokes. And we always teased Josh as he got older. I'd always say, "Josh, there's jokes, and then there's dad jokes, and then there's Josh jokes." And Josh would always laugh, and he loved that one. And I said, "So Josh, you're always making people laugh. That's like, you're like the opposite of goth, buddy." He goes, "Nope, I'm goth." And I said, "All right, man, you're goth." So then everything went black, and all of his clothes had to become black at that point. But his favorite color, as a small child, his favorite color was actually pink. When he was a little boy and was in gymnastics and coming to the gym with me all the time, we had our gym shirts, and he would always get the pink ones. He loved the pink. But then as he got older, I think, he of course got teased for that because he was a boy and liked pink. So then he went to green. And so then everything had to be green. And those of you who know Josh, if you've ever been in his place, he paints everything green. If it wasn't green and black to begin with, it got painted green and black. And it was just one of his obsessions, and everything had to be that way. And then there's Josh's drink combos and food hacks. So Josh has been doing drink combos for as long as I can remember. We've got pictures of him very small with a drink in his hand that looks like nothing that's on the table to drink, because he always found other things to put in his drink. From the time he was just tiny, whenever he'd pour a drink of something, he'd look for something else to put in it. And I know one of my mom's favorite and worst memories was when Josh decided to spruce up her coffee a little bit. And he was looking for something to add to the coffee to make it taste better and do a drink combo. And the only thing close by was dish soap. And so he put dish soap in my mom's coffee. She didn't enjoy that cup of coffee very much. And the food hacks as well. He was constantly creating food hacks. And they were so awful. The things he would put together and eat and then sit there and eat them, it was so gross. And I always tried to get him to do an entire YouTube channel, and always told him, "Josh, you could be rich if you ever did an entire YouTube channel of nothing but food hacks, and no swearing, no smoking, no drinking, and just keep it clean and monetize it, and people will watch that because it's hard to look away as he makes these gross things and then eats them very grossly." And they're all over his hands, all over his face, and he's slurping. I've never met a human being who could slurp food the way Josh did. And but it was his signature thing. But nope, I'm good, Dad. I said, "But Josh, you could literally make some money off YouTube." A lot of people think that Josh made a lot of money on YouTube because he had so many followers, but he didn't. And I said, "You could, that'd be one way to do it." And then, of course, his wand business could have been just absolutely huge. It was successful on Josh's level for sure, but he had over 100,000 people that wanted wands, but he's always talking about winning the lottery. He's going to win the lottery and build that clock tower dream house. And I kept telling him, "Josh, you've already won the lottery because you've built this thing on YouTube over years and years of work, and so now just make wands and sell it to all those people, and you don't need to win a lottery. You can afford to build your dream house." And of course, he'd always give his standard response, "I'm good, Dad. I'm good, Dad." "But Josh, you can make a bunch of money." "I'm good, Dad."
First word that comes to mind when I think of Josh is difficult. He was the most stubborn person on the planet. But behind that stubbornness was a person full of love, creativity, personality, spunk, and a truly gentle spirit. When I ask you to think of Josh, I'm sure you will think of cobras, magic wands, Ozzy Osbourne, guitars, Stummy Sean, or maybe even Puff, his bearded dragon. I think of these things too. But I also think of our childhood, watching Cartoon Network together. From Courage the Cowardly Dog, to Teen Titans, to Dexter's Laboratory. He did an amazing Dexter impression. I think of sitting in our basement playing Guitar Hero, and him whooping my ass at it, but he would always give me a chance. Or even the skateboarding game he would play on PlayStation, where yet again he would try to teach me cool tricks. I think of staying up until 3 a.m. watching Ghost Hunters marathons, and his desire to scare me all the time, and being successful at it. We even went ghost hunting in our own basements multiple times. I think of his love for animals, how gentle, patient, and caring he was with them. I remember when a squirrel fell out of a tree in our front yard, and he tried to put it back on a branch. It bit him, and he had to go to the hospital. But he would have done it again if it meant helping an animal. Or a rescue dog, Chance, who's obnoxious in his own ways. But Josh could get through to him. He talked about him until the day he died. And I'm sorry that he could never meet his nephew Louie, who is currently playing with a toy so obnoxiously that he'll probably make it into this video. I think of thunderstorms and his belief that he could conjure them. There have been many storms since he passed, and I would like to think it's him telling us he's okay. That he's at peace now. I'm honestly not sure if I'll ever be able to not think of him when it storms. Josh left an everlasting impact on the world. While he was notorious online, and definitely had some radical opinions, I ask you to join me in remembering the artistic, creative, kind, gentle, ghost-loving, incredible Dexter impersonator, Guitar Hero champ, Cobra-loving, magician, Ozzy Osbourne's biggest fan, most insane chef, if you could even call it that, storm conjuring, crosswalk changing, musician. That was Josh. It will be hard to find a soul as unique as his. But Josh will live on in many different ways. 34 is officially the coolest age. There's comfort in knowing that he'll be watching every time it storms, or when an animal is saved, or even every time Ozzy Osbourne is played. I just know he's rocking with Ozzy, with Puff on his shoulder, an epic pipe hanging from his mouth, and all of our dogs watching from the crowd. Please give Obi a kiss for me. I love you so much, Josh. And I'm sorry I didn't get to say it enough while you were here. You were a good big brother. And we'll miss you always.
Whenever we went anywhere in public, Josh would hold the door for whoever was behind him, which sometimes scared people because Josh, again, kind of had a scary appearance sometimes. And he'd stop and hold the door for the person behind him. And quite often, people paid no attention, would just say thank you. Other times, they'd look a little sheepish, but they'd go through and smile and say thanks. But that's who Josh was. He was very kind. Anybody that ever came to his house, we had to get on him about this all the time because random people would show up at his house because of his YouTube. And he just let them in. Hey, come on in, have a beer. And if you're one of those people that went to his house, you know that. And all the people I've ever seen that did go to his house said that. He was just so kind. He was just so nice. And that's who Josh was. He was very kind and very nice. And I remember when he got his first apartment, he kept getting in trouble for letting homeless people stay with him. And because, it's a violation of his lease. And the landlord said that one time she came in and there was 10 different people, I think she said, that one day sleeping on his floor. And, kept having to have talks with him. And she said, Clinton, he's not getting it. Can you please talk to him? And I sat him down and I talked to him and said, "Bud, you can't do this or you're going to get kicked out of your apartment." And he said, "But Dad, it's cold outside. They don't have anywhere to go." And that's who he was as a human. That was the deepest part of who he was. It was that loving, caring person. So when Josh started to become famous, he'd always say, "You don't realize how famous I am, Dad." And he was right. Everywhere we went, we ran into fans everywhere. And it was crazy. The last few times we traveled, and Josh didn't travel with us a lot as he got older, because as he got older, it got harder. Even just going on a Thanksgiving weekend, he'd break down, because it was just that any change in his daily routine was just so hard for him. And he had his daily routine, and it had to be the same every day. He got up, he did X, Y, and Z in that order. And oh my gosh, that kid, when he'd take a shower, he'd stand in the shower for at least an hour until he ran out of hot water, and do comedy routines. And so when I'm picking him up for appointments, it was always so frustrating, because I learned I had to tell him that I was picking him up at least an hour earlier than I needed to pick him up, because Josh had no concept of time, no concept of time or numbers. They just didn't make any sense to him. Time and numbers didn't. Money, he had no concept of it. $5, $500, they were the same. It was just a 5, and that really meant nothing to him. Same with time. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 hours didn't mean anything. It was so abstract to him, and he really, really struggled with those things. And he, when I'd pick him up, "Josh, I'm going to be there in 5 minutes. Be ready." I show up. "Oh, hey, Dad." I said, "You ready?" "No, I'm just getting in the shower." "Dude, you don't have time to take a shower. We got to go now." But whenever you pressure Josh, especially with hurrying, he would totally break down. And then it was be what he would call, not me, he would call it one of my autistic fits. And because he would just have a breakdown, and then I'd have to calm him down and have to get him back on track. So I learned the hard way many, many, many years ago not to push him in terms of time, but it was always so hard, especially when we're running late. So I just started telling him, if I had to pick him up at 2:30, I'd tell him 1:30, and I'd show up at his house an hour early, knowing that he was about to get in the shower and do a 1-hour comedy routine as I sat in his living room listening to him. And he cracked himself up in his comedy routines quite a bit, which was always great. So that's what he did, and that routine was tough. And when we got out of that routine, it was really, really hard on him. So he didn't travel with us a lot. But the last couple times we traveled, every single gas station we stopped at, every single restaurant, people would recognize him. And they'd come up and want to do selfies with him, which he, of course, always did. And he'd never say anything. He would just turn around after doing a selfie with somebody, and he'd look at me with a big old shit-eating grin on his face, and he'd give me his horns up signs with his hands and bob his head up and down as if to say, "Told you." And even in the airport, the last time we flew, several people recognized him in the airport. You could see him pointing and talking, and then they'd finally come over and ask him if they could take a picture. And Josh always would, of course, because he just loved people, and he loved being famous. That was like his biggest thing, which leads me to Josh's biggest passion, which was music. And from the time Josh was a toddler, he loved music. He'd go up and he'd climb up on Grandma's piano bench and start playing the piano, banging on it, of course. He's a toddler. But even the banging wasn't like what I'd seen most toddlers do when they'd bang. It actually didn't, it sounded okay. And we'd let him do it. And then he got into guitars, and he had a harp, tried violin. So he just a real passion for music and loved music. But Josh had a serious learning disorder. And learning for him was really, really, really hard. So he would get very frustrated very easily, which is also very common with with him as a person and the type of autism he had. And so learning was such a frustrating thing for him, and he was smart enough to know that he struggled with it. And so that, I think, made it even harder, because he knows he's smart enough to understand this, but he doesn't, and then he would just get so hard on himself. I've never met a human being who was more hard on himself than Josh was. It was a constant thing of telling him, "Josh, lighten up on yourself, man. Give yourself a break. Quit." And he would try, along with that, he'd try so hard to push people away all the time too. And it was more of a defense mechanism, I think. If I can push you away from me, then you can't hurt me. Or if I'm the one leading the hurt, then you can't hurt me. Which is so sad to watch. And he did it his whole life. And that's one of the reasons he and I were so close, because he tried over and over to push me away as well. And there's no way I was going anywhere. And he'd push and push and push, and he'd be out of my life for a couple days, and then he'd come back and I'm so sorry, Dad. I thank you for never giving up on me type of stuff, which, of course, I'm never going to give up on him. But anyways, back to his love for music. So from the time he was little, he loved music, but again, he had a hard time learning. So when he put him in music lessons, and he had a guitar teacher who's a friend, I won't mention his name because I don't want him to get targeted, but he was like this cool high school kid in the town we lived in who was an epic guitar player, and they had a band, and the band was known by everybody in town, and they played all the time, and these guys were just awesome. And it became Josh's dream at that point. He was going to be a rock star, and that was his dream. And I remember this guitar teacher is just a really cool guy. We're still friends today, and he just couldn't. He's like, Josh just couldn't learn, and Josh would get so frustrated, and so he had a really hard time. But this guy was so patient with Josh and so kind, and always just really tried to help him. And he did a lot of good for Josh, even though Josh really struggled with learning just basic music. But Josh just kind of like making his own sounds, and he had an ear for it, so he could usually hear something and repeat it at least recognizably. And so that's kind of what he liked to do with his music, and it's what he did with his music. And as with everything in life with Josh, he just did his own thing, and he was who he was, and that's what he did. But his goal is to be a rock star. And I remember, when he was little, we've always talked in our family, I don't care what it is you want to be, you can be it. Whatever you want to do in life, go do it. And don't let anything stop you. Never give up. Chase your dreams. Chase your passions. And Josh wanted to be a rock star. So I'm like, all right, buddy, let's do this thing. And I talked to him about what that path was, how to become a rock star. What do you got to do? And he didn't want to do any of that. And I'd be like, well, Josh, if you want to be a rock star, you're going to have to do this, kind of follow the steps here. And as usual with Josh, he would just do his own thing. So, nope, I'm doing it my way. I'm doing it my way. Thank you to Deathbed Tapes for publishing Josh. He made his life dream come true. Because of you, he's a legitimate rock star. He's recorded, and you'll never know what that did for him. How amazing that was for him, and how cool it made him feel. Because he was legit. He was a recorded rock star, and that's nothing could ever take that away from him. No amount of harassment, no amount of bullying, no amount of tormenting could take away the fact that he produced all those albums. And he was such a thing of pride for him. And believe it or not, Josh did not have a lot of pride for himself. Josh was very, very hard on himself, as I mentioned earlier. So it was really amazing as his dad to get to see him feel pride. So that's Josh's music. He's a bona fide rock star now. Josh was not perfect by any means. Of course, nobody is. God knows I'm not. And Josh was quite literally one of the most stubborn human beings I've ever met in my life. And he had a defiant disorder that was insanely strong. Quite often I would just look at him and say, Josh, the sky's blue, just to start an argument, because it didn't seem to matter what was said to him. He was going to argue with it, and he was going to fight it, and he was going to go the other direction. But then the little turd was also smart enough, then when you try to use reverse psychology on him, he'd recognize it in a heartbeat, and then just call you out on it and run with it the other direction and just frustrate you to the no ends. It was like a superpower he had to be stubborn and argue with anything and refuse to let anybody help him in his online world. Along with all of the tormentors, there were a lot of people who legitimately tried to help him, Deathbed Tapes being one of them. And I think it's Exhumed Images, if I have that right, with his t-shirts and stuff. But that was tough. Josh would not let people help him. I tried so hard to help him with his YouTube channel. I have a lot of video editing experience and photography, and I wanted to help him. And nope, this is mine, which I totally respected. He needed to do this without me. This needed to be his thing. And without help from his dad, which I got. But he wouldn't accept help from anybody. He always had to do everything his own way. And he was so damn stubborn. When the horseradish story always kills me. When he was in 6th grade, And I was making a sandwich and I had horseradish. And I say, Josh, want to have some horseradish? And he said, yeah, and I got some on a spoon. And he went to bite it. And I said, whoa, don't, do not put that in your mouth. Take just a little bit. This stuff's really hot that will hurt you, literally hurt you. And he's just looking at me with that stubborn look. And I said, Josh, don't do it. And I know the look. And I'm like, don't do it, man. And he shoved that whole spoonful of horseradish in his mouth and just lost it. I mean, blowing snot everywhere, tears out of his eyes, literally on the floor hollering because of the pain. And I'm like, dude, I told you. Which brings me to Josh's learning curve. So interesting because Josh had an incredible memory, except for learning. So Harry Potter, when our kids, we read when they were young, we read bedtime stories to our kids every night. And I remember when Harry Potter came out and Tanis heard about it and she's like, oh, I'm going to get that for Josh. I think he'd love it. And Josh, so she got it. But of course, when she says, Josh, you're going to love this, he immediately said, no, I'm not. And she said, trust me, you're going to love this. Nope, I'm going to hate it. And I'm like, ah. And so Tanis said, well, I'm going to read it. And Josh goes, well, I'm not going to listen. And Tess said, fine, I'm going to read this for bedtime story. You can choose to plug your ears if you'd like, but I'm reading it. And sat down and started reading it. And Josh, of course, had his ears plugged. And she kept reading and read. And pretty soon his ears were unplugged. And then when she stopped reading, he said, hey, wait, can we keep going? And from that point on, he was a huge Harry Potter fan, as we all were. And as he got older and grew out of bedtime stories, as the books, continued to come out, he started reading his own books. And I will credit Harry Potter for helping him learn to read, because that was a huge motivator for him to learn to read, because he really loved reading Harry Potter. Harry Potter trivia, our whole family loves Harry Potter, so we do a lot of stuff with Harry Potter, and we have Harry Potter trivia games. And it's not really a game because all of us know pretty much all the answers. But on game night, Josh was always in and out of game night. Sometimes he'd come, sometimes he wouldn't. But some of the games he struggled with, so it made him feel stupid, so he wouldn't want to play, which I totally get. But that one he would play, but he wouldn't play. I'll just watch. All right, man, you sure? Yep, I'll just watch. And we'd have teams. And if there was an answer nobody could get, and it would happen sometimes, and he'd sit there and he'd get his little Josh chuckle going, and I say, what? And he'd give us the answer, and he'd sit, and he knew all of it. He could remember all of it. But when it came to learning music or learning a math problem, we could teach him the process, and he would learn it, but the next day he'd forget it. And we'd teach it to him again, and he'd forget it, and teach it to him again, and forget it. And so the way his brain functioned was really weird like that, and I don't understand it, and the doctors didn't understand either on why he could have such a great memory, but certain things he just really struggled with learning and remembering. And the horseradish, long walk here, was one of those stories. Just last year, I think it was Easter, and he was over for Easter supper, and we're having prime rib, and had horseradish, and he put this gigantic blob of horseradish on this tiny piece of meat, and he was getting ready to eat it, and I said, Josh, don't do it. And he gave me that look, and I'm like, oh, here we go. And I'm like, Josh, I'm serious, man. Do not eat that. That is hot. Nope. Wham, it goes in his mouth. Bam, the sinuses empty. He's coughing and raging and bellowing on the floor, and tears running down his face. But that was Josh. In a nutshell, his stubbornness. And when he first moved out of the house, he became so independent, and he was so tired of me trying to parent him, so he just blocked me. It was the most frustrating thing in the world. He'd block me on social media. He'd block my phone so I couldn't call him. And then I'd have to go to his house. And then he lived in his apartment, and he lived in a controlled apartment, so you couldn't get in. So I'd have to go around the back, through the alley, and down the side of the building and knock on his window just to see Josh, because he had me blocked everywhere. And then I'd knock on his window, and he'd come in and go, oh, hey, Dad, what's up? As if he doesn't have me blocked on everything. I'm like, dude, you blocked me on everything. Oh, yeah, sorry about that. I'm like, come on, man, enough. Unblock me. So he goes, no, you're always trying to tell me what to do. I'm like, Josh, I'm your parent. I'm supposed to help you navigate life. And I don't care. You're always bossing me around. And a lot of that was more than parenting. Of course, as a parent, Josh had chosen a path that I didn't picture for him. And I did in his earlier life, those earlier late teen, early 20 years, try to mold him differently. I remember about the third time he blocked me on everything, and I came to the realization that if I'm going to have him in my life, I'm going to have to accept who he is. That didn't just mean accept him and just, okay, you can be whatever, but I don't approve of it. That meant I had to fully accept who he was and go even one step further. And I had to be proud of who he was. And so I remember this is a huge realization for me and a huge turning point in his later life, because Josh and I had always been extremely close his entire life. But then there was like 2 years where it was really rough, because it was just nonstop fighting because he didn't like my parenting and I didn't like the choices he was making. Very common for that age with most parents and kids that age. But with Josh's extreme, the way he thought about things and the way everything became very extreme in his mind, it was always kind of at a next level with Josh. So those 2 years were rough, and I realized that, no, I'm not going to lose Josh, and I need to just I had these conversations with myself. All right, Dad, that's enough. You need to be proud of your boy and accept him for who he is. And up to that point, I'd always kept thinking, I think, it's a phase, or he's going to grow out of this, or he's going to become okay. But that isn't how it works. And not only that, but he doesn't need to change. He can just be him. And I need to accept that. And when I did, it was a huge moment for me. And I had to go trek down the alley and down the side of the building and knock on his window because he had me blocked. And went in, we had a heartfelt talk. And I remember when I told him I was proud of him and who he was. And I was very relieved for myself because I knew it was true and I believed it. I wasn't just saying it. And then from that point on, Josh and I were again very, very close and have been right up until he died, which I'm thankful for. Not that he died, of course. I'm thankful that we were close. And those 2 years were just kind of left behind, and we became the dynamic duo again. So that was Josh's stubbornness. Josh was literally the most unique human being I've ever met. He truly marched to the beat of his own drum and did so unapologetically, despite nonstop judgment, harassment, and the abuse he lived with. I sincerely wish that I could have the courage to be so true to myself without fear of judgment. And I told him this every day that I saw him. Josh, you are the strongest person I know. I don't know another human being who could deal with the harassment you deal with on a daily basis and be okay in any way, shape, or form. The nonstop abuse and to just still have a smile on your face of any kind was amazing to me. And he was such a strong person. And I think as a parent of a child with special needs, and I think most parents with children with special needs would say the same thing, I learned way more from Josh than I ever taught him, because I learned about life and I learned about people and I learned about acceptance and I learned about tolerance and I learned about patience and I learned about all of this because I had such a unique, wonderful, beautiful boy. Whenever my family and friends would ask me, "How's Josh?" I'd say, "He's Josh. He's just Josh." Because that was the best way to describe Josh. He's just Josh. And the family and friends who knew Josh would always say, "Yep, I get that." I'd like to raise a glass to Josh. Drink combo if you got it. And Josh, when this is over, I'll go pour one out for you, buddy. I'm going to do a toast to you right now, as we all are. Josh, you accomplished something in life that many people never will. You made a difference. You accomplished something that most people want in life but won't achieve. You left your mark on the world, and you're going to be remembered. I wish you could see just how much you were loved and cared about, Josh. But deep down, I honestly think that you knew that most people were rooting for you and not against you, buddy. Josh, I'm so proud to be your dad. and I'm gonna miss you more than you can ever know. To Josh, long live Gothic King Cobra. I love you, bud.
Say goodbye to love, say goodbye to life. Oh. Say goodbye to all the good times, say goodbye to all the good memories. Time and memories fade like smoke from a cigarette. Living life for no regrets. Time slipping away like a cigarette in the ashtray. Burning out and fading away. Oh, say goodbye to love, say goodbye to life, say goodbye to all the good times. Yeah, say goodbye. Memories fade like a thunderstorm passing over. Broken hearts litter the road of life like shattered glass. Life's a cruel joke. Cold, cold rain wash away my pain. Alcohol to drown myself until tomorrow, until I'm somebody else. Say goodbye to this life. Say goodbye to this life. Say goodbye to all the good times. Watching my memories fade into existence. Never say goodbye. Never say goodbye. Time goes on. Say goodbye to all the good times. Say goodbye to love. Say goodbye to life. Never say goodbye.
Hello, you've reached Josh Saunders, Gothic King Cobra, aka King Cobra JFS. I can't come to the phone right now because I'm busy kicking ass at life and being a badass. If you leave your name and number, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you're one of my trolls, get a life, losers. If you're one of my fans, thank you for the support. If you're friends, family, or anyone else, I'll get back to you ASAP. Thank you, and have an awesome day.